friends, Maham and I crochet cute things. Please don't skip this section because I'm going to go over what kind of yarn and hook to use for these projects, which is incredibly important to make sure that you get the perfect winter crochet accessories. Starting off with the scarf, which has a knit-like texture and is really quick to work up if you use a bulky yarn. I used Wool Ease, which is a size 6 bulky yarn with a 9mm hook. All the exact yarns that I'll mention, including what shade I used, will be on my Amazon storefront, and the link is in the video's description. I got all of my yarns from Amazon, so you can just check out the storefront and get them from there as well. Next, the beanie. The pattern is the same whether you want to make this beanie for yourself or for your cat. All you have to do is adjust the number of chains you do at the beginning, which will make it longer or it'll make it shorter, and then follow the rest of the pattern like normal. For this project, I used Wool Ease with a 9mm hook too. I tried to use yarns that were a mix of wool and acrylic so that it wouldn't be as pricey, but it would still keep us warm and comfortable in winter. And a Wool Ease was definitely my go-to. It is a really soft yarn and it is so fun to use. I also finish my projects in half the time since it's a bulky yarn, so it works up quicker. So I recommend using a size 6 bulky yarn if you want to get a similar texture and effect like mine. Now for the chunky headband, I used a yarn that didn't have a name tag or a brand on it because I got it from a local craft store, but you can substitute it with any bulky yarn, and you can also use Wool Ease with a 9mm hook, which will give you the same effect. For the fuzzy arm warmers, I used Rowan Kid Silk Haze Mohair from handmake.com, but you can substitute this with any mohair. You'll need at least 2 skeins of these because I like using 2 strands of mohair together, but the actual arm warmer itself won't use as much of the skein. So if you have 2 mohair skeins laying around, just use them together with a 3.5mm hook. Optionally, you'll also need some bows, or maybe you can use other charm details like stars or buttons that you can sew onto the sides of the arm warmer. Also, best wishes for the new year. I've got a lot more seasonal themed crochet projects coming this year, and for those of you with creative dreams to launch an online shop, uplevel your career, or build a creative freelance business on the side but you don't know where to start, let me introduce you to today's sponsor, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry pros across fine arts, graphic design, marketing, productivity, and more. If you're not sure where to start, Skillshare designed learning paths to help you go from novice to pro in no time. These hand-picked classes build on one another, reinforcing lessons in a variety of categories including productivity, marketing, creative freelancing, and more. If you're thinking of starting your first YouTube channel, this learning path is a great fit for beginners that covers video editing, confidence on camera, and how to grow your channel. There's also an amazing crochet learning path to elevate your projects and improve your skills. I personally found the sewing learning path incredibly helpful when I wanted to make a customized little t-shirt for my crochet teddy bear. The classes guided me through foundational sewing skills, making a pattern for the shirt, and how to transform the design into a made-to-measure custom piece. So Skillshare is the place that can get you from point A to point B, that can cheerlead you as you get there and provide the quality, support, and inspiration and learning paths to help you. And the best part is that the first 500 people to use my link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare to start their creative journey. To make the chunky scarf, we're going to start off by chaining the length that we want for the scarf, and this will be the long chain that can wrap around you. And then we're going to do rows to build the width of the scarf. So the number of chains that you do will determine how long your scarf is, and the number of rows that you do will determine how wide your scarf is. Start by making a regular slip knot. And now chain the length that you want. This can be any number of chains depending on what length you want for your scarf. For my scarf, I'm going to do a total of 120 chains because I want a pretty long scarf, but you can do more or less. For the demonstration, I'm going to show you how to make rows and how to do the stitches with this really short piece of chain, but for my actual scarf, I'm going to chain 120. Once you've got the length that you want with your chains, you're going to skip the first chain and you're going to yarn over slip stitch into the second chain from your hook. So to do this, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the second chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you're going to slide the same loop through the other 2 loops on your hook. I like using my fingers to just help me pull them through. And that is your first stitch, a yarn over, slip stitch. Yarn over, go into the next chain, pull up a loop, and then slide that same loop through the other 2 loops on your hook, like that. Now go ahead and yarn over slip stitch into every chain until you reach the end of your first row. Depending on what kind of yarn you're using, doing this will be easier or a little bit more difficult. I'm using chunky yarn, so it's really easy for me to just use my fingers to slide the yarn through. Here's how it would look like if you do it without using your fingers to guide you. You would just twist your hook downwards and slide it through. That's the end of your first row. To start the next row, you're going to chain one, but you have to make sure that this chain is really, really tight. And then you're going to turn your work. Now, these are your stitches, and then there's going to be a third loop if you turn your work this way. So this is the top of your work, and then if you turn your work this way, you're going to see this third loop over here. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to be inserting all of the stitches into the third loop. So yarn over, insert your hook into this third loop over here, and yarn over slip stitch. So pull it through the 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over, insert your hook into the third loop, pull up a loop and slide it through the other 2 loops on your hook. Go ahead and repeat this all the way down the row. Here's what it'll look like if you don't use your fingers to guide you. So you would just insert your hook and slide it through. Working into the third loop is what will create that fake knit texture for a scarf. So make sure that you're working into the right loop, otherwise you won't get that texture. It might be a bit tricky to figure out where the third loop and the last stitch is. So the third loop would be this one. You can just turn your work this way and see that is your last stitch. And when we turn it here, we've got our third loop. And now we're done with our second row as well. Now we're going to start our third row. So once again, every time you want to start a new row, you always have to chain one super tightly. Chaining tightly will help you get sort of kind of straighter edges. They are still going to be bumpy, but they're going to be straighter than usual if you chain tightly. Then you're going to turn your work to the other side. This is the side you're working on, and turn it over here. And now we're not going to be working into any of these loops at the front. We're going to be working into the third loop at the back over there. So yarn over, insert your hook into that third loop, and yarn over slip stitch. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 over there. The stitch is really easy. You just need to make sure that you're inserting your hook into the right loop, and it's pretty quick to work up as well if you're using a chunky yarn. I managed to finish my scarf in under 6 hours. I've reached my last stitch over here, so 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to go into that third loop and yarn over slip stitch. And that is our third row. So by the third row, you'll be able to see your knit texture. Now we're going to start our next row. So chain one tightly. I'm going to show you a few more rows, and then you can continue on by yourself. The main point is that you're yarn over slip stitching into all of the third loops at the back. Now when we come to this side, you will see your stitches on this side, but when you turn your work here, you'll have your stitches there as well. So you have to find the third loop. 1, 2, and 3. So you're going to be working into the third loop over here. Now go ahead and just yarn over slip stitch into the third loop of every stitch. Make sure that you don't accidentally skip one. Make sure that you're going into the right loop, and don't make your stitches too tight. So try to keep an even tension. I usually just pull this a little bit and then yarn over. And when I use my fingers to pull it through, I also pull it to make it a little bit looser, if that makes sense. So you might need to practice with this stitch if it's your first time, just so that you can have an even tension. Otherwise your scarf might come out looking a bit wonky, or your stitches might not be as neat. Once again, we've reached the last stitch, so it's a bit confusing since everything's twisted. So just turn it to this side, count your loops. So you've got the V, 1, 2, and this must be the third one. So you're going to go into your third loop and yarn over, slip stitch. And now we're done with another row, and that is how the pattern is going to repeat itself. I'm going to show you one more time and then you can continue on. So you're going to chain one tightly every time you want to start a new row. Turn your work and find the third loop. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. So you're going to yarn over, slip stitch into that back third loop. Make sure that you're working into the third loop of every stitch and use your stitches to guide you. So find the V's and count the stitches so that you're making sure that you're in the third loop. This is how it'll look like if you don't use your fingers to guide you. You just twist it, and you can use your fingers to stretch it out. So you hold it here and you stretch, and it's going to make it a little bit easier to slide your hook through. Last stitch, 1, 2, that's a third loop. I can insert my hook into it. I use my fingers to pull and slide my hook through. So it really depends on you if you find it easier to use your fingers to loops or if you just want to pull and then pull it through. So definitely experiment and see which way it works best for you. Now go ahead and do as many rows as you want to until you have the width of your scarf, or as wide as you want the scarf to be. This is the swatch, and I'm going to show you my finished scarf. Here it is. So I did 14 rows and it's pretty long, so make sure that you do a long chain at the beginning to get the length that you want. And it is completely normal for your scarf to be curling inwards like this because this texture is knit-like and knit curled. The crochet is just sort of mimicking that. I'm going to fasten off. So to do this, just chain 1 and cut your yarn. Pull and tighten to secure it in place. Now using a plastic needle, you can weave the end to hide it. So just insert your needle through the backs of the stitches and then pull. Cut the excess yarn and you're all done with your scarf. Now I'm going to show you how to make tassels that you can put at the edge of your scarf. To make the tassels, you're going to need an object that's about the size of your palm if you want to make them the same size as mine, or you can also wrap them around a box or a pencil case or even your phone. So I think your phone would work as well. You could maybe wrap the yarn around it and then follow the steps. We're going to take our yarn, hold on to it, and then wrap it 3 times around whatever piece you've chosen. And then you're going to hold on to it, get your scissor, and cut. And that's going to give you 3 pieces of around the same length. Just make sure they're laying equally and then fold them in half like this. You're going to need your hook for the next step. Insert your hook through the edge right over here. So make sure you're not going through the stitches, just as close to the edge as you can possibly get. So like that. And then you're going to slide these 3 pieces of yarn through. So make it really, really tight. Slide them through. And then you're going to take the loop that you have over here, push your fingers through, and grab the ends. Pull them through the loop like this, and then tighten. And there you've got your tassel all attached. So it's basically just 3 pieces of yarn of the same length that you tie a knot at the edge. To make the arm warmers, if this is your hand, we're going to start by chaining the length that we want for the arm warmers. So when you're making your foundation chain, make sure that this chain is as long as the size that you want for the arm warmers. And then we're going to continue doing rows of half double crochet, and these rows will basically be the part of the arm warmer that will wrap around your hands, and then I'm going to show you how to join it. So the arm warmer is basically just a rectangular piece that we're going to wrap and connect with some bows or whatever detail you want to add. I want my arm warmers to be really fluffy, so I'm using 2 strands of mohair and I'm going to be working with them together. So go ahead, you can do this with regular yarn, fluffy yarn, thick yarn, whatever yarn you're using, the steps will remain the same. You're just going to go ahead and make a regular slip knot. And then you're going to chain the length that you want for your arm warmers. This is what your chains should look like. Make sure that these are not too tight and not too loose. So try to keep an even tension. Also remember to keep track of how many chains you're doing so that when you're making your other arm warmer, you can have the same size. I did 35 chains, and now we're going to start our first row of half double crochets. You can use any stitch you like, but I like how half double crochets looks for this project. You're going to skip the first chain and half double crochet into the second chain from your hook. So yarn over, insert your hook into the second chain, and then pull up a loop. Then you're going to have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops, making a half double crochet. Now go ahead and half double crochet into every chain. So yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. Go into the next chain, half double crochet, pull through all 3 loops, and you're going to do this until you reach the very end. The total stitch count will be 1 less than the number of chains that you did, because remember we skipped that first chain at the beginning. So in all of my rows I'll have 34 stitches, and I started off with 35 chains. This is what it should look like when you're done with your first row. Now we're going to start our second row. Every time you want to start a new row, you're going to chain 1, turn your work, and then don't work anything into your chain 1. We're going to insert 1 half double crochet into every stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, pull up a loop, and half double crochet like normal. And that's your first half double crochet of the second row. Go ahead and do 1 half double crochet into each of the stitches to make your second row. When you're inserting your hook into the stitches, make sure that you're grabbing both the loops. So that is 1 stitch over there, and then half double crochet. So if you turn your work this way, you'll be able to see that these are your stitches, and when you're inserting your hook, you should be going through this and then half double crochet. Do this all the way until the end. And that is what your second row should look like. Now we're going to start our third row, and from now on you're going to keep doing rows until your arm warmer can wrap comfortably around your hands. To start the next row and all the rows afterwards, you're going to chain 1, turn your work, skip the chain, don't insert anything into it, and half double crochet into every stitch. And that's basically it. Now go ahead and do 1 half double crochet into every stitch. Once you're done with this row, you can start another row by chaining 1, turn your work, and then do 1 half double crochet in every stitch again, and keep doing rows until your arm warmer can wrap around your hands. I did a total of 21 rows, and this is what I have so far. Now we're going to be joining the sides together. You can join the sides completely together, or you can add bows like I'm going to, but first we're going to be slip stitching the parts that we want to be attached. So over here, and then leaving this part open just to add a fun little design element, and then the bow will go on the side over there. First we're going to join the corner together. So fold your work this way and turn your work so that you're looking at the other side. Insert your hook through the stitch on the other corner, and then slip stitch to join. like that, and then insert your hook through the stitch again and slip stitch one more time just to make it extra secure. And I'm going to slip stitch into the next stitch as well, so I'm just inserting my hook through the stitch, and then insert your hook through the stitch on the other side as well, and slip stitch. Now you've connected the top part together, so this is basically going to be the part that you slide onto your hands, and it's going to hold it in place like that. Now we need to connect one more time over here so that this part stays closed and you can put your thumb through it. And then I'm going to connect once more over here and once more over here at the end. Now just slip stitch into the number of stitches that you want to skip on one piece only. So I'm only slip stitching on this piece and not there, so just insert my hook and slip stitch. I'm gonna do 9 slip stitches and then I'm gonna join. So 3, 4. Now you have to make sure to skip the same number of stitches on the other side as well. So super fluffy, so it's hard for me to see, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you know what, just line it up as best you can, and then insert your hook through whatever stitch corresponds with it. So you're gonna go into the next stitch and then into the stitch on the other side as well, and then you're gonna slip stitch. And now you've got your second hole. I'm just going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches as well, just to make it a little bit more secure. Right, now I'll show you what that looks like. So now you insert your insert your hand through, and you've got a little hole for your thumb, like that. And now we're just going to do the other side as well. So I'm going to have one piece joined there and the last one joined over there. So slip stitch across this side until you want to join, and then insert your hook through both the pieces, slip stitch, and then you've joined it. Then again, slip stitch onto the other side. When you reach the place you want to join, insert your hook through both the pieces and slip stitch. Once you're done, just chain 1 or 2, and you can also slip stitch into the side of one of the pieces to make it extra secure. And then get your scissor and you're ready to fasten off. Pull and tighten to secure, and you should be all done with your arm warmer. I do have a tip for you guys. Make sure that your slip stitches are not too tight. Otherwise, if they're too tight, this part will bunch up. And there you've got your cute little arm warmer. I'm going to sew on some of these bows into the places where I've got the joints. I'm just going to use a regular needle and just sew them on. You can also glue them on if you don't like sewing. To make the beanie, we're going to be making a long rectangular piece and then sewing the sides together and then joining the top to make it bunch up. So I have a beanie that I'm using for size reference. So we're basically just going to have a long rectangular piece and we're going to sew it at the top like this to make the beanie shape. Now you have to make sure that your foundation chain is long enough to make the top part of your beanie as well as the part that you're going to fold, because this is all going to work in one piece. So if you have a beanie that you can use for size reference, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm going to put the measurements of my beanie and the number of chains that I did. So go ahead and make a regular slip knot. And now chain the length that you want. Make sure that your chains are not too tight. Try to keep an even tension. I did a total of 24 chains, and this is as long as my beanie. To start our first row, we're going to do one more chain really tightly. This is going to be our turning chain and doesn't really count as a stitch. Now, this is the front of our chains, and we're going to turn it to the back side like this. Now, we've got these ridges. So you've got 1, 2, 3. This middle part over here is the ridge of the chain, and we're going to be working into the ridge. So instead of working into the chain like that, we are going to turn it over and we're going to work into this middle loop over here. and we're going to be doing a yarn over slip stitches. So you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the ridge. Remember, we're skipping the first chain, so you skip this ridge and you go into this one. Insert your hook into the ridge. Use your fingers to help you if it's a little bit tight. And then pull up a loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook. Take the same loop and slide it through the other 2. I like using my fingers to help me. And that is your first yarn over slip stitch. And we're going to do this into every chain. So yarn over, insert your hook into the next ridge, pull up a loop and slide that same loop through the other 2 on your hook. One more time, make sure that your chains are turned towards the back and not the front. Yarn over, insert your hook through the ridge, so 1, 2, 3, into the second one over here. If your chains are looser, this will be a little bit easier. Pull up a loop and slide that same loop through the other 2 on your hook. You can use your fingers to help you, or if your stitches are pretty loose, you won't need to. And into the next chain. So this is what it'll look like when you're not using your fingers to help you. Go into the next chain. And this is what it'll look like if you're using your fingers to slide the loops onto each other. Go ahead and do this all the way until the end. This is what it should look like as you're doing your yarn over slip stitches. Don't forget to go into the last one and make sure that you're always working into the middle ridge for the first row only. Now we're done with our first row. We're going to chain 1 really tightly to start a new row, and these are the steps you'll do every time you're making another row. So chain 1 tightly, turn your work, and now turn your work so you're looking at the top part of the stitches like this. This little V over here is your stitch. We're going to be working into the back loops of every stitch. This is the front loop and this is the back loop. So we're going to be working into this loop only. Yarn over, go into the loop, and yarn over slip stitch. That's your first stitch of the next row. Yarn over, go into the back loops only, and yarn over slip stitch. Yarn over into the next back loop. You're going to do this into every stitch. So if you keep your work turned this way, you might accidentally go into this loop. So just make sure that your work is turned to the top side and you're inserting your hook into the back loop of the stitch. Do this all the way until you reach the end of this row. Make sure that you don't accidentally skip a stitch. Make sure that you don't forget to work into the last stitch of every row. Sometimes you can mistake it as a chain and skip it, and then your edges will be all uneven. So you can also check what your stitch count is in every row and make sure that it's the same for all of them. We're going to start our next row, so we're going to repeat the same steps. You're going to chain 1 tightly, turn your work, and then turn your work to the top part so you can see the front loop and the back loop. And then yarn over slip stitch into every stitch. Remember, you don't have to work anything into the chain 1 that we do at the beginning. It's just our turning chain and doesn't count as a stitch. We're repeating the same steps that we did in the previous row. You're just yarning over and slip stitching into the back loop. You're going to do this until the end of the row. This is what your work should look like so far. This stitch very neatly replicates a knit stitch. And that's just about it. Now you're going to keep doing rows until your beanie can wrap around your head. So for every row, you start off with a tight chain 1 and turn your work. And then turn your work so you can look at the top loops and yarn over slip stitch into the back loop of every stitch. And you're going to repeat these steps and do as many rows as you want to complete the beanie, and then I'll show you how to sew the top and the sides. Here's what my piece looks after I completed doing 41 rows, and now I'm ready to join the piece together. When you're done with the last stitch, just fold your work and make sure that the stitches at the bottom align with the stitches on this side over here. So you'll see that your stitch looks like this if you lay your piece flat, but if you move it to the side, you'll have a row of stitches over here as well. And we're going to be working into the back loop over here. So front loop and back loop. In the stitch where you were working, insert your hook back through, and then insert your hook through the back loop of the stitch on the other side. And now we're going to slip stitch the sides together. So just pull your hook through, and also through this little loop over here. And that is your first slip stitch. Now to join the sides together, you're going to insert your hook through the stitch, and then the back loop of the other stitch over there, and then slip stitch like that. One more time. Insert your hook through the stitch, and then insert your hook through the back loop on the other side, and then slip stitch by pulling the loop through all of the other loops on your hook. Let's do it once more. Insert your hook through the stitch, and then the back loop on the other side, and slip stitch by pulling the loop through all the other loops on your hook. You're going to do this all the way down, and make sure that your stitches are lined up so that you're doing the right stitch across each other so that your work is equal. So you don't want your work to end over here because you joined the wrong stitches together. So just lay your work flat and make sure that your stitches align as you're joining. Now get your plastic needle because we're going to be doing some sewing. Once you've reached the end, this is what it'll look like. And we're just going to chain one so we can fasten off. And when you're fastening off, make sure that you leave a little bit of a long tail, because we're going to be using this tail to sew our beanie together at the top, so it needs to be kind of long. And then pull your hook up and tighten. So you're done with the body of the beanie, and now we just need to give it that shape. Get your plastic needle, and we're going to tie a knot. Now here's how this is going to work. We're going to insert our hook through and then up like that. And I'm going to be working 2 by 2, but you can do this all at once, or you can do it step by step like I am. It's completely up to you. I just prefer doing it step by step because I have a plastic needle and I don't want it to break. And as I go along, it's easier for me to pull it really tight and then move on. So we're going to be sewing all around and then pulling it really tight so that it closes up at the top. So do you see your stitches over here, the V stitches? I sew this and this together. So I go down and up through the other stitch and pull. All the way, and then I tighten it like that. Again, I'm going to work into the next section now, so I'm going to go down in the corner. So there's no specific place, but you kind of get the idea that you're working over here, and you're skipping this V part. And pull again, making sure it's really, really tight. And again, down and up. Try to stay close to the edge, so don't go through the holes over there, even though it might seem easier. We're going to try to make this as neat as possible. Down and up. So it depends on how you started. If you started by going up and then down, then you're going to be doing up and down. So it really depends on you. And I'm going to repeat this all the way around till I come back over here. As you're doing this, you're going to notice that the hole is getting smaller, but it's not going to close completely, which is why we're going to have to do some more stitches through it. But that's why I prefer working 2 by 2, because I can make sure that I'm pulling each section as tight as possible. If you have a bigger hole, you can sew the hole closed as well, so you can go through the stitches that are corresponding and just close it up. tighter at the top. And basically just move around the top center, inserting your needle through any stitch you can get because it's going to be pretty tight. And make sure that you're not pulling on the hole too much because then your stitches are going to get looser. When you're done and you're ready to end your work, you're just going to tie a knot. So I'm just going to go through this part over here. Pull it through. Careful not to break my needle. And once I have a little loop left, I'm going to go through that loop as well. And just pull, 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 making a knot. Once you're satisfied, just insert your needle through the hat so you can bring it to the back side. Just push it through. And now you can hide your end at the back part over there. If you like how the back part looks more than the front, then you can turn your work inside out and use this as the front of your beanie, but I don't really mind the top. I think it's okay, so I'm just gonna leave it as it is. Just gonna cut the extra. And you are all done with your beanie. Now there is an optional step where you can use extra yarn or ribbon and you can tie a bow around the top of your beanie. I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to use our hook for this, so insert your hook through the top loops and just pull your thread, needle, yarn, whatever you're using through, and just continue to do this all the way around. So now your yarn is facing downward, so you have to place your hook from the front and then pull it through. Now your yarn is facing outward, so you're going to place your hook from inside and then pull it through. And just repeat this all the way around, yarn facing downward, so you place your hook from the outside and pull it through. And repeat. So go to the next side, pull it through. We're basically just threading the yarn or whatever you're using through the edges of the beanie, and you're going to keep doing this until you come all the way around. Once you're done, you're just going to pull it through one last time, and then you've got the strings over here, and you can tie these strings into a bow. So first tie a knot, you can even make it a little bit tighter, and then tie it into a bow and adjust it as you want it to be. Now, to make the cat beanie, all I did was follow the exact same steps, but I started off with a shorter chain length. Started off with 11 chains, then I did one more chain for the turning chain, and then I did the exact same steps. I don't remember how many rows I did, but you can just see how big your cat or your pet's head is and see if it fits comfortably, and then just join it, and then follow the exact same steps to make a smaller beanie for your pet. Now, to make the chunky headband, we're going to start off with a foundation chain, which will determine the width of your headband. And then we're going to keep doing rows and rows and rows and rows and rows until you have the length that you want for the headband. And then let's say this is your head, that's the width, and this is the length that goes all the way around. Start off by making a regular slip knot. And then you can chain the width that you want. This can be any number of chains. I'm going to do 5 because I have super chunky yarn. And then we're going to do one more chain, which is going to be our turning chain. Make sure you do this one really tightly. And now we're going to half double crochet into each of the chains. So skip the first one and insert your hook into the second chain. Yarn over, insert your hook into the second chain, pull up a loop, and then you've got 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. Now go ahead and insert your hook into every chain and half double crochet into each one. Don't forget to half double crochet into this last chain as well. And that is your first row. Now we're going to chain 1 to start a new row, and this is how you're going to start every row. So chain 1, turn your work. Now we're going to be working into the back loops of every stitch. So count it out with me. So you've got 1, 2, and 3. So that's the back loop. And another way of looking at it is to just turn your work so that you're looking at the top of your work. This is the front loop, and that's the back loop. So we're going to be working into this back loop over here. So yarn over, insert your hook into the back loop of the stitch, pull up a loop and half double crochet. Now go ahead and do a half double crochet into the back loops of every stitch. Don't forget to do it in the last stitch as well. This one might be a little bit hidden, so just use your fingers to help you insert your hook in there and half double crochet. Make sure that you're only working in the back loops. That's your second row. Again, we're going to chain one to start a new row, turn our work, and once again we're going to be working into the back loop. So turn your work this way. This is your front loop, that is your back loop, and this is your chain. So you just ignore the turning chain. Yarn over, insert your hook into the back loop, and half double crochet. Go ahead and do this in every stitch until the end of this row. We're basically doing half double crochet ribbing, which will create that chunky sort of knit-like effect. If you don't like the look of half double crochets, you can also try this with single crochet. So same steps, single crocheting into the back loops. Start a new row by chaining one, turn your work, and we're going to repeat this one more time. So turn your work to the top, front loop, back loop, and half double crochet into the back loops of every stitch. After this, go ahead and do as many rows as you want by following the same steps that we've been doing until your headband can wrap comfortably around your head. Once you're done and your headband can wrap around your head, here's how to join it together. You're just going to fold your piece in half and make sure that you align the sides, and then we're going to slip stitch through. So insert your hook into the stitch and pull the loop through. Then go ahead and slip stitch these two sides together. So make sure you're lining your work up. Insert your hook through the stitch and through both the pieces like that, and slip stitch. And into the next one, and slip stitch, and the next one. And once you're done, here's how to fasten off. You're just going to chain one or two to make it extra secure. This is what your headband will look like once it's joined. To end your work, simply cut your yarn, pull and tighten it, and you can weave in these ends later. I also like making a knot with the slip knot end that we had just to secure it even more. Stretch this out a little bit to make it a bit more even, and there you've got your headband.